I am Melody, a 30-year-old woman who just became the ultimate target of a vicious public execution. My sister stood on the podium beneath the crystal lights with extreme contempt burning in her eyes. She gripped the microphone tightly while pointing a judgmental finger directly at my face from across the silent room. A freeloader for 10 years means this family does not need someone like you, my sister declared in front of all 120 guests. The most devastating part was not her public insult, but the sight of my parents standing right beside her. They slowly nodded in complete agreement with that cruel mockery while hundreds of pairs of eyes stared at me. Instead of breaking down or causing a dramatic scene, I simply placed my water glass calmly onto the nearest table while looking straight into their judgmental eyes with absolute indifference. I just smiled gently at the entire judgmental crowd standing there and simply replied, "Okay. If you want to know how a supposed freeloader destroyed the entire career of these arrogant people overnight, please hit the subscribe button to follow my journey of completely turning the tables." Looking back at the foundation of my family, the deep cracks were always visible long before everything completely shattered. The cruel favoritism began extremely early, with Chelsea receiving absolute financial backing to launch her glamorous life, while I was pushed aside without any safety net. My parents willingly paid for her expensive private college education without asking a single question about her failing grades. When I finally turned 18, I made the independent decision to take out federal student loans to pay for my tuition at a standard public university. This practical financial choice made Mom and Dad incredibly angry because they expected their children to maintain a wealthy image regardless of the actual cost. They immediately labeled me as a massive disappointment who completely lacked ambition because I refused to beg them for tuition money. Meanwhile, Chelsea blatantly drained their entire retirement savings to establish her own private consulting company right after her graduation. She desperately tried to build the perfect facade of a highly successful corporate leader to impress everyone in their wealthy social circle. However, her actual business management skills were disastrously weak from the very first day she opened her office doors. She spent significantly more time attending luxury networking events than actually looking at her own internal balance sheets. Mom and Dad completely ignored her obvious financial incompetence and continued pouring their remaining assets into her sinking ship just to maintain their fragile social status. They constantly praised her empty titles while deliberately ignoring the massive pile of unpaid invoices accumulating on her expensive mahogany desk. To avoid being financially exploited or constantly subjected to their exhausting daily comparisons, I actively chose the path of total silence regarding my own life. I realized very early that showing any sign of personal success would only make me a primary target for their endless monetary demands. Therefore, I frequently wore outdated sweaters and convincingly played the role of a struggling low-income office worker whenever I had to visit their home. I would deliberately park my used car several blocks away just to hide my actual reality from their judging eyes. They never bothered to ask about my real career progression because they were entirely comfortable believing I was permanently stuck at the bottom of the corporate ladder. Their absolute lack of curiosity about my daily life made my disguise incredibly easy to maintain over the years. The unbearable family toxicity always reached its absolute peak during our annual Thanksgiving holiday dinners. I constantly became the main topic of their mocking conversations over roasted turkey and ridiculously expensive wine. Chelsea would sit confidently at the head of the dining table bragging about her fictional corporate conquests while loudly offering to pay for my cheap meals. I was publicly treated like an annoying charity project by the exact people who were secretly drowning in their own massive debt. Mom would constantly remind me how grateful I should be that they even invited someone with such a pathetic salary to their elegant holiday gathering. She would deliberately place me at the very end of the table away from their important guests. I swallowed their bitter insults along with my food, because protecting my financial privacy was far more valuable than proving them wrong at a dinner party. Every condescending remark they made only fueled my hidden determination to build an impenetrable empire entirely on my own terms. I simply nodded politely at their harsh criticisms while quietly calculating my next major career move in the background. Dad would often slide a $20 bill across the table toward me with a look of intense pity. I always accepted the small cash with a quiet thank you to maintain the illusion of my total dependence. Their arrogant blindness became my greatest advantage as I continued aggressively climbing the corporate ranks without any interference from them. 1 year before that disastrous anniversary party took place, I made a silent choice that entirely shifted my career trajectory. The tightly guarded secret was my official promotion to the highly coveted position of vice president, specializing in corporate mergers at one of the largest financial institutions in Chicago. I deliberately transformed the ruthless contempt radiating from my family into a powerful catalyst for my own professional survival. I worked frantically for 80 hours every single week to seize absolute control within the highly competitive corporate battlefield. Instead of attending social events or building a normal personal life, I buried myself entirely in complex financial spreadsheets and aggressive corporate negotiations. The physical exhaustion never bothered me, because proving my worth through financial results became my sole obsession during those grueling early years. My relentless dedication finally culminated during a crucial performance review with the chief executive officer of the entire firm. The vice president position is yours, Melody, since you have proven the exact sharp business acumen this firm desperately needs, my boss told me inside the glass boardroom. Thank you for the opportunity, sir, as I will ensure all upcoming acquisitions deliver the absolute highest profit margins. I replied with cold confidence. Utilizing the executive bonuses attached to my corporate title, I immediately purchased a secured penthouse apartment overlooking the downtown skyline. I steadily built a substantial personal investment portfolio while keeping every single financial record strictly locked away from any potential family discovery. The advanced security protocols at my private residential building required strict biometric access, which guaranteed Mom and Dad could never drop by unannounced. Building this hidden empire gave me a profound sense of personal safety that my own childhood home had never provided during my upbringing. I furnished the massive living space with custom imported furniture while enjoying the absolute silence of a home completely devoid of their toxic criticism. I hired elite financial advisors to completely mask my asset ownership through various corporate shell companies to ensure total anonymity from their prying eyes. My art of deception eventually reached a level of absolute perfection whenever the mandatory holidays or dreaded family birthdays finally approached. I purposefully maintained ownership of my sputtering decade-old sedan just to park it cautiously in their pristine suburban driveway without raising any suspicions. I would deliberately shop the clearance racks at local discount stores to purchase the faded sweaters I wore exclusively for our tense family dinners. Maintaining this impoverished visual illusion required meticulous planning, but it successfully prevented anyone from demanding sudden financial loans to support Chelsea. Mom would frequently stare at my scuffed shoes with disgust before loudly offering to buy me proper footwear for my supposedly low-level job. I always politely declined her passive-aggressive charity to ensure my carefully constructed facade remained completely intact throughout the evening. The psychological contrast between my two completely different lives often felt incredibly surreal during those exhausting weekend visits to their massive house. During the chaotic corporate weekdays, I ruthlessly orchestrated multi-million-dollar corporate takeovers that directly determined the ultimate survival of struggling national companies. I commanded entire teams of senior financial analysts who hung on to my every word during intense strategy briefings regarding our upcoming corporate acquisitions. I was the ultimate authority figure making decisions that shifted millions of dollars across markets with a single stroke of my pen. However, my weekend persona required me to sit quietly at their dining room table while nodding respectfully at Chelsea. I had to swallow my immense professional pride while silently listening to her condescending lectures about what it truly takes to achieve genuine business success. She would aggressively wave her manicured hands while explaining basic economic principles to a woman managing a billion-dollar corporate portfolio. I simply focused on my plate while letting her arrogant words bounce off my impenetrable armor of hidden success. 6 months later, the ruthless corporate whirlpool unexpectedly brought a highly familiar name right onto my executive desk. My financial institution rapidly expanded our aggressive acquisition strategy across the regional market looking for vulnerable targets. Chelsea had managed her boutique consulting firm into the ground until it landed on our confidential list of struggling corporate entities requiring an immediate buyout. The massive corporate dossier contained extensive financial documentation revealing the absolute disaster hiding behind her carefully curated public image. I introduced the thick file to my private office before thoroughly examining the catastrophic numbers detailing their impending financial ruin. My brother-in-law Marcus currently held the prestigious title of Chief Financial Officer for her failing enterprise. However, the comprehensive internal audit report resting securely in my hands exposed a massive mountain of hidden debt, pushing their entire company toward inevitable bankruptcy. They had essentially mortgaged their entire future while desperately pretending to be highly successful industry leaders. To guarantee absolute professionalism regarding this highly sensitive corporate acquisition, I deliberately refused to intervene personally in the financial evaluation process. The entire appraisal project was strictly delegated to my most trusted team of subordinate financial analysts. Management explicitly instructed them to evaluate the complicated data fairly, without applying any special treatment or malicious prejudice against the failing business. They were ordered to scrutinize every single financial ledger, just like they would process any other desperate corporate entity seeking our financial salvation. My pristine professional reputation demanded complete objectivity while dealing with a company owned by my own toxic family members. Watching Chelsea blindly march toward her own financial execution became a daily routine, as I simply monitored their progress reports from a safe distance. Meanwhile, during our obligatory weekend family gathering, Chelsea loudly announced her grand plans to host a massive 10-year anniversary party. She enthusiastically described renting the luxurious Grand Hall at the prestigious downtown boutique hotel to celebrate her fictional business milestones. This extravagant celebration was actually an incredibly desperate move, entirely funded by maxed-out corporate credit cards. She intended to flaunt a completely fabricated high-class facade to successfully deceive potential business partners into saving her sinking ship. Mom completely bought into this ridiculous illusion and proactively called my personal phone several days before the grand event took place. She did not contact me to cordially invite her youngest daughter as a respected guest of honor to this monumental family celebration. Instead, she explicitly ordered me to arrive extremely early to perform the grueling physical labor and logistical cleanup for their glamorous corporate event. "You need to arrive 3 hours early to arrange the tables and chairs, Melody, because Chelsea is incredibly busy with important investors." Mom's voice echoed steadily through the phone. Hearing that unreasonable demand instantly triggered a familiar wave of frustration while I stared down at the massive financial report exposing their impending bankruptcy. "I have essential work to complete at the office, Mom, so I cannot act as your unpaid catering staff." I tried establishing a professional boundary. The line remained completely silent for several seconds while she processed my rare refusal to immediately comply with her ridiculous logistical demands. "Do not be so incredibly selfish today. Since you cannot contribute financially, you must use your physical labor to repay this family," she coldly stated before disconnecting the call. Their sheer audacity to demand my unpaid physical labor, while I secretly controlled their entire financial destiny, was completely staggering. Slowly placing the telephone receiver back onto its base allowed me to silently accept the demeaning logistical assignment. Attending that pretentious anniversary party as their hidden servant would give me the perfect vantage point to witness their magnificent illusion right before I legally dismantled it. Carefully locking their disastrous financial audit inside my secure desk drawer successfully prepared my mind for the ultimate weekend confrontation. Just a few days before the grand anniversary party took place, the critical merger approval documents were placed neatly onto my executive desk. I held my expensive fountain pen tightly while staring directly at the confidential corporate contract that could instantly save Chelsea from complete financial ruin. A massive internal conflict waged inside my mind as I seriously debated whether to grant them ultimate corporate mercy or execute their absolute destruction. Signing that single piece of paper would immediately clear their massive debts, while declining it would officially push their entire fake empire into bankruptcy. Deciding to delay my final corporate verdict, I left the unsigned paperwork inside my secure office before driving toward my childhood home. Arriving at the sprawling suburban property immediately subjected me to a relentless barrage of degrading physical tasks, orchestrated entirely by my demanding family. They completely stripped away my basic human dignity by treating me exactly like an unpaid servant hired exclusively to prepare their glamorous celebration. I spent 3 exhausting hours arranging their massive floral centerpieces while constantly receiving harsh verbal corrections regarding my supposedly terrible aesthetic choices. Mom commanded me to haul heavy boxes of expensive decorations from the damp basement while completely ignoring the obvious physical exhaustion covering my face. Chelsea sat comfortably on the plush living room sofa criticizing my cleaning techniques while casually sipping sparkling water from a crystal glass. My fragile patience finally began shattering completely when I walked quietly toward the kitchen to fetch more cleaning supplies for their pristine floors. A hushed conversation caught my attention, causing me to freeze completely behind the partially open wooden door leading into the massive dining area. "Look at how she dresses because it is completely pathetic," Chelsea whispered mockingly while adjusting her expensive designer jewelry. She paused to take another sip of her beverage before continuing her brutal character assassination with absolute disgust in her voice. "Remember to tell her to stay hidden in the kitchen area because I do not want my business partners to know I have such a wretched sister," Chelsea instructed Mom with a cold sneer. Hearing my own mother hum in total agreement with that vicious statement felt like a physical knife twisting deeply into my chest. The absolute peak of my lifelong humiliation arrived exactly 10 minutes later when Mom walked directly toward me holding a plastic shopping bag. She reached inside the crinkled bag before aggressively shoving a cheap polyester catering uniform straight against my tired chest without any hesitation. She bluntly demanded that I wear the degrading outfit and remain completely out of sight to avoid embarrassing our prestigious family front of their wealthy VIP guests. Right at that suffocating moment, my best friend Brenda unexpectedly walked through the front door to pick me up for our scheduled lunch appointment. She silently witnessed the entire degrading uniform exchange while noticing the absolute devastation completely washing over my frozen expression. Brenda immediately stepped forward to grab my arm before pulling me forcefully away from the toxic, manipulative swamp my family had carefully constructed. "You have absolutely no obligation to endure this toxic garbage for another second, Melody, because you have the real power." Brenda squeezed my hand tightly as we walked toward her parked car. Her fierce loyalty instantly shattered the remaining doubts clouding my judgment regarding the impending corporate execution sitting on my office desk. We drove away from that hostile environment without offering them a single word of explanation regarding my sudden afternoon departure. Returning safely to my secure penthouse allowed me to confidently pack the unsigned merger rejection documents directly into my leather briefcase for the upcoming weekend. My ultimate decision was finally solidified through their own arrogant cruelty, leaving absolutely no room for any future corporate mercy. Saturday evening unfolded under a canopy of artificial crystal lights and the suffocating scent of expensive perfume inside the grand hall. An incredibly fake, luxurious atmosphere completely consumed the entire room, while Marcus and Chelsea desperately worked the massive VIP crowd. They continuously flashed their brightly polished corporate smiles while aggressively flattering every wealthy investor to secure their ultimate financial survival. Their desperate attempts to secure additional funding looked incredibly pathetic to someone holding their disastrous audit reports inside a secure briefcase. I purposefully wore a simple discounted dress while standing completely silent inside the darkest corner of the massive ballroom. My cold eyes carefully observed their perfectly constructed facade standing precariously on the absolute edge of total financial collapse. They casually ordered expensive catering services while actively hiding millions of dollars in unpaid corporate debts from their oblivious wealthy guests. Every single elegant decoration surrounding them was secretly funded by maxed-out business loans pushing them closer toward inevitable bankruptcy. The oblivious investors blindly applauded their imaginary corporate success without realizing they were standing upon a massive sinking financial ship. The formal anniversary celebration eventually reached its expected climax when Chelsea stumbled slightly while walking toward the main stage. Her highly anticipated expression of corporate gratitude derailed completely after she consumed several heavy glasses of expensive champagne. She aggressively grabbed the heavy microphone before demanding absolute silence from the wealthy attendees gathering around the central platform. Instead of delivering professional remarks regarding her fictional business achievements, she decided to target my completely silent presence. The alcohol completely removed her basic social filters, causing her to launch a vicious verbal attack completely unprovoked. A freeloader for 10 years means this family does not need someone like you, Chelsea declared loudly in front of all 120 guests. The sharp screech of the audio equipment echoed painfully through the grand hall before absolute silence froze the entire wealthy crowd. Dozens of judgmental whispers immediately started circulating among the highly dressed attendees, while they stared directly at my isolated corner. My eyes immediately shifted toward the front row where Mom and Dad stood proudly beside the decorated wooden podium. That specific moment delivered a betrayal completely crossing every single boundary of basic human morality without any hesitation. They did not show a single ounce of parental protection before slowly nodding their heads in absolute agreement with her cruel public mockery. Seeing the people who brought me into this world actively participate in my public execution completely severed our remaining biological ties. I refused to grant them the ultimate satisfaction of witnessing a dramatic emotional breakdown or a chaotic screaming match. Okay. I just smiled gently at the entire judgmental crowd standing nearby and simply replied with total indifference. There was absolutely no dramatic crying erupting from my lips after witnessing their ultimate unforgivable parental betrayal. I merely placed my condensation-covered water glass gently onto the nearest cocktail table without making a single sound. Turning my back against their massive illusion allowed me to walk straight through the heavy wooden exit doors without looking backward. The crisp night air immediately cleared my lungs as I walked purposefully toward the quiet parking lot located behind the massive hotel. Sitting comfortably inside the driver's seat of my used vehicle provided the perfect silent environment to finalize my ultimate corporate decision. I quickly opened my secured laptop before accessing the highly confidential banking network containing their pending merger approval. My fingers typed out the final rejection codes, permanently activating the devastating financial death sentence for their fraudulent consulting company. Sending that digital execution order officially erased their miserable company from our prestigious corporate acquisition pipeline forever. The glowing screen confirmed their total ruin before I started my engine and drove peacefully into the dark city streets. The next morning, the corporate death sentence was officially sealed and delivered directly through our secure electronic system. Utilizing my absolute authority as the Vice President of Mergers, I formally issued the final rejection email terminating their acquisition. I deliberately attached the comprehensive internal audit report exposing their massive, unrecoverable bad debts to the official corporate notification. Absolute panic immediately consumed Chelsea and Marcus the exact second they opened that devastating professional correspondence inside their rented office space. Several major banking institutions simultaneously called them to freeze their corporate credit lines, without offering any financial extensions. Their carefully constructed illusion of being highly successful business leaders shattered into a million irreversible pieces before the morning hours even concluded. The severe financial consequences of their massive fraudulent spending finally caught up to their arrogant corporate facade. Instead of wasting their limited energy screaming uselessly through a telephone call, they decided to physically hunt me down for a direct confrontation. Chelsea somehow managed to track down the highly classified address of my secured luxury penthouse building, located exclusively in the wealthy downtown district. She aggressively dragged Mom and Dad straight into the pristine marble lobby of my private residential tower to exert massive psychological pressure. They relentlessly harassed the professional front desk concierge while loudly demanding immediate access to the wealthy executive who supposedly ruined their perfect lives. The security personnel were moments away from forcefully removing them when the polished silver doors of the private VIP elevator slowly slid open. The ultimate shock paralyzed their angry faces as they watched me step confidently into the brightly lit reception area. I was wearing a custom-tailored designer suit worth significantly more than their remaining corporate assets combined. The entire building security team immediately bowed respectfully while greeting me formally as their esteemed resident director. The arrogant entitlement completely drained from my family members as they finally connected my incredibly wealthy reality with the supposedly pathetic freeloader they had mocked yesterday. Chelsea completely lost her sophisticated facade while stepping aggressively toward my heavily guarded position near the polished reception desk. She looked absolutely unhinged with her messy hair and wrinkled clothing resulting directly from her morning of absolute financial panic. "You must reverse this corporate decision immediately because you are actively destroying my career and stealing the house from Mom and Dad." Chelsea screamed loudly while her face twisted with absolute desperation. Hearing her shamelessly use our parents as emotional leverage only solidified my absolute lack of corporate mercy toward her failing enterprise. She was completely unwilling to accept personal responsibility for driving her own consulting firm into massive, unrecoverable debt through her ridiculous vanity spending. Mom started crying real tears while desperately reaching her trembling hands toward my expensive silk jacket in a pathetic attempt to gain my sympathy. They genuinely believed their biological connection would magically erase years of severe emotional abuse and continuous public humiliation. I simply made an objective business decision entirely based on your disastrous financial reports, because your own blind arrogance is what actually killed this company. I replied with a razor-sharp glare while smoothly stepping away from their grasping hands. They immediately transitioned from aggressive screaming to pathetic sobbing, while desperately begging me to save their sinking financial ship from total bankruptcy. Mom practically dropped to her knees while weeping loudly about family loyalty in the middle of the crowded luxury lobby. Right at that incredibly chaotic moment, Brenda walked firmly through the revolving glass doors, holding a thick stack of official legal documents. She had utilized her extensive legal expertise to draft a comprehensive cease and desist order, preventing them from ever contacting me again. She walked directly past my weeping family members without showing a single ounce of mercy before handing the official restraining paperwork straight to the head security guard. If you do not immediately vacate this private residential property, I will instruct the local police to arrest everyone here for criminal harassment," Brenda announced with a commanding voice cutting sharply through their chaotic sobbing. Her fierce legal warning instantly silenced their pathetic weeping, while the heavily armed security guards stepped forward to forcefully enforce the immediate eviction. Chelsea stared at the legal documents in absolute horror, finally realizing there was absolutely no escape from her impending financial doom. I simply turned my back against their shattered illusion and walked smoothly toward my waiting luxury vehicle outside. A few months later, the final legal dust finally settled over the absolute wreckage of the former family I once knew. The practical consequences of their extreme corporate arrogance unfolded ruthlessly, without offering them any possibility of a miraculous financial reversal. Chelsea and Marcus officially filed their comprehensive paperwork for Chapter 11 bankruptcy protection after completely exhausting every single available credit extension across the entire financial district. The federal bankruptcy court aggressively liquidated every remaining commercial asset belonging to their fraudulent consulting firm to satisfy their furious corporate creditors. Their expensive office furniture and luxury company vehicles were publicly auctioned away to cover an incredibly tiny fraction of their massive outstanding financial obligations, leaving them completely humiliated and utterly defeated in the business world. The devastating financial shockwave extended far beyond their failing business because Mom and Dad had blindly guaranteed their massive corporate loans. They had foolishly mortgaged their sprawling suburban childhood home to secure additional emergency funding for their favorite daughter during her desperate final months. The ruthless banking executives immediately foreclosed on their massive property, the exact second Chelsea officially defaulted on her primary business loans. County sheriffs forcefully evicted my parents from their luxurious neighborhood and forced them to quickly relocate into a remarkably cramped apartment located in the distant suburbs. Their perfectly curated wealthy social facade completely disintegrated overnight, leaving them totally isolated from the prestigious friends they had desperately tried to impress for decades. They lost absolutely everything they had previously valued because they chose to blindly protect a massive financial lie instead of protecting their own daughter. The comprehensive legal restraining order meticulously established by Brenda created an impenetrable permanent barrier protecting my newly established peace of mind. Her aggressive legal maneuvering successfully blocked every single desperate phone call and pathetic email attempting to beg me for emergency financial bailouts. Any unauthorized attempt to breach my physical proximity would immediately trigger a severe criminal trespassing charge and potential jail time, without any hesitation. This absolute legal firewall completely severed the toxic biological chains that had silently suffocated my personal growth for over 2 excruciatingly painful decades. They were finally forced to face the incredibly harsh reality of their own disastrous financial decisions without using me as their convenient disposable safety net anymore. They felt incredibly empowering after enduring their endless psychological abuse. Embracing my ultimate professional victory, I successfully requested a strategic executive transfer to our massive corporate headquarters located in New York City. Relocating across the country officially launched an incredibly liberating chapter of my life, completely untethered by any toxic labels from my painful past. I enthusiastically embraced absolute freedom while comfortably navigating the incredibly fast-paced financial markets dominating the bustling eastern metropolis. Stepping completely outside their suffocating shadow allowed me to actively build genuine relationships based entirely on mutual respect and shared professional integrity. I consciously replaced the heavy burden of toxic biological obligations with an incredibly supportive network of chosen family members who actually valued my authentic existence as a successful, independent woman capable of determining her own glorious destiny. Looking back at the absolute wreckage of those shattered biological relationships helped me realize an incredibly profound and crystal clear truth. Firstly, sharing the exact same bloodline never provides anyone with a legitimate legal or moral shield to justify continuous psychological abuse. You possess the absolute fundamental right to permanently walk away from anyone who intentionally degrades your personal value regardless of their biological title. Secondly, you should never waste your precious energy desperately explaining your reality or arguing with toxic individuals who only want to drag you downward until you achieve an undeniable level of total independence. Allowing your massive, undeniable success to speak for itself provides the most ruthless and completely resounding response to anyone who ever doubted your potential. Thank you so much for dedicating your valuable time to listening to my personal journey until the very last second. I truly appreciate your wonderful companionship throughout this incredibly challenging and deeply emotional storytelling experience. Have you ever stood at the painful boundary dividing toxic family loyalty and essential self-respect? Please share your own stories and personal thoughts in the comments section below, because